So I rolled my ankle, and as I told you earlier, I wish I had a cool story to tell you, like I was doing something real cool and I slipped and fell and twisted my ankle. No, I was just walking out of the gas station, and the curb, you know, goes this way, and the drive kind of goes like this, so at an angle, and it gets steeper as you go, and I just walked off of it and misjudged how tall the curb was and just rolled the ankle. And so when everybody sees me on FloBowling, they're going to notice that, oh, EJ's not throwing it as hard, and he's not getting into his shot as much. Well, that's why, because can't push off this ankle. I tried practicing here, and it's just not working, so I'm going to have to try to manufacture something and manipulate the ball, and hopefully I can do good enough to get some wins. I mean, it's just doing what you're not supposed to do to create power, and it creates inconsistent power, but just using your upper body more, using my arm to create speed, and you know, try to keep my rev rate as close to normal as possible. But you know, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Obviously, everybody here is on top of their game, so being a little bit injured and have to manipulate stuff is it's not going to be an easy task trying to win a match. I think in certain situations, yeah. I was trying to shoot spares, and it's really difficult for me to get my lines on shooting spares because I'm so used to shooting them one way. So I've been practicing a lot, trying to get my lines right for my spare shooting. But you know, it's all about just going out and executing. You know, if I can figure out a way where I feel like I can kind of repeat doing the same thing over and over again, does it put me at an advantage? Yeah, a little bit, but at the same time, if I can repeat, it really doesn't. Well, you know, RICE is the best method, you know, rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So, you know, I've got a couple like copper fit style sleeves that are just, you know, compression that I put over my ankle. Got Genesis tape that I'm putting on. I may end up getting some athletic tape and putting it on, make it a little more rigid so I don't, you know, hurt it even further. Because I got some tournaments coming up that are super important that I need to you know, rest up and get ready for. So, you know, just rest, ice, and compression and elevation. That's what I'm going to be doing.